The eviction moratorium has ended. Well, somewhat. My name is Troy Funk, and I'm a licensed real estate broker in the state of Florida. Now, the purpose of my channel is to provide value. And if I do accomplish that, I ask that you hit the like button and certainly hit the subscribe button. Okay, let's talk about the eviction moratorium ending. So it has ended. Well, no, it hasn't. Not for everybody, but for the majority, yes, it should have ended. So who hasn't it ended for? Well, if you're living in the state of California, New York, Illinois, Hawaii, District of Columbia, and again, you want to check with your state because life's a moving target, right? And we still have the Delta variant starting to spike things up. So it's hard to say where things are at this point and where they're going. But for the majority, the eviction moratorium has ended. What does that mean? Well, we're now experiencing the side effects of the pandemic, and I'm talking about the economic side effects. I want to talk about the damage that caused and what's the damage it's going to cause moving forward. So let's just take a step backwards now and kind of put things in perspective. Now, with a pandemic, the CDC had put a froze on eviction moratoriums that said, landlords, no, you cannot evict during a pandemic. It's a health crisis. And getting out of that moratorium ban had to be a subjective date. Well, it had to be subjective, but it also has to stop. I mean, the problem with a moratorium is it stops the circulation of the economy. And to talk about that, I want to talk about what are the bad things that have happened as a result of this moratorium from an economic standpoint, and what does that look like moving forward as we get through this moratorium. So there are states that have been able to continue the eviction moratorium, but at some point that has to stop. The eviction moratoriums have to end because it's hurting everybody in the long run. And let me just explain that. You may say, well, it depends on where you're at. Well, let's look at the economy in general. I mean, the economy is a moving cycle of activity. And anytime you freeze that moving cycle of activity, there's going to be some side effects. So, what would be a side effect of the moratorium? Well, one of the biggest side effects that we've seen that's been very challenging now moving out of this moratorium is the imbalance of supply and demand. Now, there were tenants as we were going into the moratorium that would have been evicted. They weren't paying their rent, or even during that place without a pandemic, they got a free ride. They were able to stay in their property without paying their rent for some time. Now, even with that pandemic, it gave some other tenants opportunities to stop paying rent. Well, the challenge with that eviction moratorium is now those tenants are going to come out of a moratorium looking for a place to rent. And we're in a completely different market. With the eviction moratorium, it has depressed the supply of rentals because there are tenants that would have normally been evicted that would have allowed properties to come back on the marketplace for rent that have not been able to do so because of the eviction moratorium. So it's frozen the inventory, limited the supply. The demand has been very high, has increased as people shuffle around. And what did that do? Well, that increased rents drastically. I mean, regardless of where you are, the probability is the rents have gone up tremendously in the past year. I'm hearing reports of about 30% depending on where you're at. So coming from point A to point B, starting a pandemic to coming out of a pandemic, the rents have just shot way up because of supply and demand. Now, after this eviction moratorium, tenants that haven't been paying their rent can be evicted. That's going to open those opportunities back up for rentals to be available. The challenge, though, is rents are high right now. And we have such a oversupply of tenants looking for properties, and it's still going to be a process of trying to get that corrected. Yet the courts are backed up. They're already backed up right now, not just with evictions. They're backed up with pending divorces, with criminal cases. And now we're going to throw all the evictions on the court system. it's going to be a problematic situation. Evictions are typically easy to get through if the tenant is not fighting you. And this is subjective depending on where you're at. Every jurisdictions have different rules on how evictions are handled. Florida, very easy state to get evictions through in most cases. So again, this is going to be challenging. It's not necessarily snap. We're going to start seeing a flood of opportunity with new rentals come on the marketplace. Not so fast. It still is a process to go through an eviction and get tenants out. Well, there's two sides to every coin, right? So let's just say you are a tenant now, and if you are being evicted, you're going to have a very hard time moving forward because you're going to start competing with all the other tenants that maybe were not evicted, that have been paying their rent, that just want to relocate. So if you're a landlord and you're looking at re-renting your property, probability is you're going to have an abundance of renters wanting to rent your property, thus causing why rents have been going up. Well, when you have an abundance of tenants, you're going to want the best tenant, right? So if a tenant has not been making their payments during pandemic, they get evicted, they're going to have a very difficult time finding housing. If you're a tenant waiting to find a property, it's tough. There's just not a lot of availability. We know that's going to start coming on the market, but there is a backlog of people looking for rentals, which is why the rents have gone up so much and still may go up to some time until this balances itself up. But the spike has just been so drastic. It's become very problematic that the rents are so high, and we are at a place where we're trying to put the pieces back together. So what's going to happen to the people that have not been paying their rent, that are going to be evicted? It's going to be problematic. In fact, I predict that we're going to start seeing homelessness increase rather drastically. If homelessness increases, so will crime, and that will all be a side effect. So does that mean that we stop the moratorium? No, because the longer that we wait, the worse it's going to get. I mean, we have to put things back in circulation, but we're going to feel some pain in that process once this takes place. So landlords, this is going to be challenging for you. There are landlords that say, look, I'm out, I'm done. I own this property. I haven't collected payments. I don't want to ever be a landlord again. My property rights were taken away from me. They have the freedom now to do as they want with their property. They can evict their tenant. Some cases, those properties are going to go on the market for sale. That will help them. That will help our housing crisis, as we have a shortage of inventory and real estate prices have been going through the roof. We need more inventory on the market. A landlord that wants to sell, certainly right now is a good time to sell. There's an abundance of buyers willing to pay top value for your property. So that's going to limit the availability of properties coming on the market, back on the market for rentals. So this whole imbalance is going to take year-ish, who knows, right? It's going to take a long time because we're already backlogged. The court systems are backlogged. The evictions are going to be backlogged. The tenants that want to move, they're going to have a challenge trying to find property. Prices have gone way up. It's all very difficult as the pieces come back together. Now, I really value your feedback in this situation. As this moratorium happens, I know everyone's coming from a different place depending on where you're at, but I can honestly say I think for the most part, this has hurt everybody. It's hurt tenants that are good tenants that are trying to pay their rent, that now have had rents increase. It's hurting those that are trying to find rentals, and landlords, of course, that have been making payments on their property, not collecting rents. This has hurt them. These are all pandemic side effects. So again, I greatly value your feedback on this mess that we're about to face, that we're already facing, and how that's going to resolve itself. I mean, I do talk about solutions for landlords. One thing that I do believe is very probably a good way to do that is if you're going to go into an eviction lawsuit with a tenant, look at the path of least resistance, and that could be a cash for keys. That's a solution to a landlord to get your tenant out, get them moving, put your property back in circulation, and either sell it or re-rent it. That's something that we've had specialty in doing. But again, just want to see how we could be of value, and I value your feedback. Leave your comments below if I've been helpful. Again, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.